And that sparked me on this journey. The things that my students have taught me is how much they will dig in when they like the text. They've taught me that their choice matters. And I've even had to read a book I didn't want to read because they wanted to read it.
Welcome to Innovating Education. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and in every episode, we engage with forward thinking educators, policymakers, and change makers. Joining us today is Dr. Valcine Brown, an educator, researcher, and advocate whose mission is to leave a positive, lasting impact on the academic outcomes of students. As the high school co lead for the English department of Desert Hot Springs High School in California, Dr. Brown has dedicated her career to reimagining how we teach, assess, and inspire learners. With a deep belief in Nelson Mandela's words that education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world, Dr. Brown has worked tirelessly to help students unlock the power of reading. Her passion for literacy, equity, and student success has led her to author the book Credit Recovery Through Demonstration of Mastery, a resource that challenges traditional credit recovery models and introduces innovative, proficiency based strategies for student success. Through her research, Dr. Brown explores the intersection of reading and mindset, showing how attitudes towards reading can shape academic outcomes. So, whether you're an educator looking to revamp your literacy strategies, a school leader exploring new approaches to credit recovery, or a lifelong learner passionate about educational innovations, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Dr. Brown, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Williams. I appreciate you for having me on.
Dr. Brown, your passion for education and literacy is evident in everything you do. I just have to ask, what sparked your journey into education and what keeps you motivated to push for meaningful change?
Now, it's very interesting that I didn't come to the education profession straight out of college. I actually experienced a couple different shifts in careers. I was a stay at home mom for 13 years. And through the process of being intentional about building activities for my own children, and I ran a home daycare, so also the children in my daycare, that is where I found that I had the ability to put together curriculum. I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And that was what sparked me to return to school and become an educator. I didn't want to do the younger ages because I'm very passionate about reading, writing, and talking about reading and writing. So that is how I found myself in secondary education. The power of education and the doors that it can open is what motivates me. I very much long to empower the students that I educate, especially since I educate at a predominantly minority led school. I have a lot of students who may not see themselves in the world of education or see themselves successful in education for a caveat of reasons. And if I can show them that, yes, you do belong here, yes, you can be successful, I feel like I've done a good day's work.
Your book, Credit Recovery Through Demonstration of Mastery, it challenges traditional assumptions about how students can recover academic credits. Instead of relying on time spent in classroom or in seat, you advocate for students demonstrating true understanding of the material. I'd like to explore this approach and the impact it's having on student success.
Oh, the credit recovery through demonstration of mastery program at my high school is in its third year of running. The very first year, we had about 45 students successfully recover credit for classes that they hadn't passed previously. The second year, we had about 65. And now, with its third year, we had about 60 who had already recovered credit just in the first semester. So it has really changed the way we have been doing credit recovery. And now I have a couple of high schools in our school district who are considering adopting this in addition to other methods that they have. So I'm looking to take the show on the road and show other high schools how they can do the same thing, utilizing personnel that they already have on site and utilizing their experts.
Let's take a step back. Can you explain what mastery based learning is and how it differs from traditional credit recovery methods? What makes it such a powerful alternative?
To traditional credit recovery methods, either students have to return to the classroom and sit there for the entire semester or a whole year if that's what they did in past, or there's online credit recovery programs. We became aware on our campus that some of the students who were utilizing online credit recovery were cheating. Can you believe it? And so we wanted to look for an alternative that would allow students to recover those credits without sitting in the entire class and avoid the cheating. And what has really pulled it together for us is that credit recovery through demonstration of mastery blends together two models that we were already using on our campus. We had utilized grade level alignment. What do students need to know by the end of ninth grade to be successful in 10th? 10th, what do they need to learn in 10th to be successful in 11th, and so on. And we had already started exploring mastery based learning. Mastery based learning takes the focus off of behaviors and it assesses skills that are being taught, demonstrated, and mastered in that classroom. And so by blending those two things, we were able to say if our expectation of students at the end of ninth grade is to be able to demonstrate these skills, students who need to come and recover first semester of ninth grade need to demonstrate mastery over just these skills and be able to isolate those things for each of those semesters within those grade levels.
So, can you explain the process of how the student would demonstrate mastery and how that actually looks like?
Yes, utilizing the grade level alignment that we had done, we looked at the expectation. Let's just take the first semester of 10th grade. We said by the end of the first semester of 10th grade, we need to know that students can read a grade level text and write an objective summary. We need to know that they can answer a text dependent question at grade level. We also want to be able to have them write an essay and incorporate evidence from a text. And we also built a standards based multiple choice to capture some of those other nuances within standards. So a student who needs to come and just recover that first semester would sit down, be given a grade level text. Now they're going to write the objective summary. The next time they come and visit for credit recovery, now they're going to be given that same grade level text, but they're given a text dependent question. So they're expected to embed evidence from that grade level text and answer it. Now we're going to have you write an essay. And the final piece is that multiple choice. So students would be able to visit the credit recovery classroom just 4 times and be able to have those things graded and receive a grade based upon their demonstration mastery on those specific tasks. We also incorporate Lexile level, which is one of the grade level standards that we have. And our district happens to give grade level assessments at the beginning of the school year, the middle of the school year, and at the end. So if the student has already done that in their regular English class, they don't have to sit and do that in the credit recovery. We just pulled those scores and utilized that and incorporated into their holistic score for that particular grade they're recovering.
So, I imagine that kind of hands on, competency focused approach requires a mindset shift for many of the students, right? How do you help them move away from the points and grades mentality to start seeing mastery as the goal?
We've started doing that within our classroom. A lot of our teachers, when we're assessing the same skill, let's say an objective summary, you're going to do that several times throughout the semester. So we're going to drop that lowest score and focus on your mastery. Let's say the rubric for an objective summary is 19 points. Let's say the first time you did it, you scored 9. Now we're going to go back and revisit what do we need to improve? How could we have done this better? Now, the next time you go and do it, let's say you score 12, we're going to drop that 9 because we're not going to penalize you for not having mastered it the first time. We're going to reward you for the growth that you've had. And we're going to continue to do that throughout the semester. Focus on mastery basis, something that's already happening within our classrooms. So our students are starting to get that shift. The new thing for them was actually doing the credit recovery through the non traditional method. I don't have to go and sit through the class again. We're going to assess you on these things that you already remember doing. You hadn't mastered it at that time, but you've mastered it now.
So, mindset is such a critical piece of the puzzle. But beyond the students themselves, I'm sure that you encounter a lot of misconceptions from others about credit recovery programs. What are some common misconceptions about credit recovery, and how does your approach challenge those assumptions?
One of the things that was a caveat for us is taking that focus away from behaviors. A lot of people focus on seat time. You have to be in class. Then what does that say for people who are able to earn their degree through taking online courses? They receive credit not for having sat there in front of the Zoom screen. They receive credit because they mastered whatever the objectives were of the syllabus and then of the various assignments, and they submit that work. I said, so the world is already shifting away from behaviors, away from seat time to demonstration of mastery. And we're always telling our students that we are trying to get you on board with 21st century skills, the skills you're going to need to be successful after high school. What does that mean for us if we aren't making that shift as well?
So, one of the biggest challenges in education is rethinking how we assess learning. With a mastery based model, I imagine that traditional quiz and test approaches doesn't really apply. What kinds of assessments work best for mastery based models, and how do educators determine when a student has truly mastered the material?
I think the biggest shift in mastery based learning is being sure that you are assessing what you taught and that those two things align. If you think you taught one thing, but you're assessing something else, then you're out of alignment. And that's one of the conversations I actually had with one of our district representatives in terms of the multiple choices that they're giving. We have quarterly benchmarks that the students have to take. And we know that some of the students are not necessarily reading at grade level. And so I said, if we're not giving them a text at grade level, now we're struggling to understand, was it a lack of understanding or a lack of skill? We have to give you something at grade level to say, okay, I at least know you can read and comprehend this. Now let's assess the skill. And I went back and forth with one of the district representatives, and she said, you have to give them text at grade level. I said, yes, they need that exposure to text at grade level, but I'm their scaffold to understanding the text. When I'm assessing them, I need to give them a text at the level that they can read. So there's two different things you have to consider. And does it mean a little additional work in terms of the educator? Yes. But if we are serious about having a grade that really reflects what students do know and what they don't know, what they've mastered and what they haven't, then we need to make sure we are accurately assessing them on their skill.
It's interesting that you say that because I had another researcher on recently who was talking about how there's an unfairness with math assessments because the reading is not on grade level with what we're teaching and asking the students and expecting them to be able to perform with math standards. And so, very interesting.
Yes, because you really don't know if that student just didn't understand the math problem, the word problem as it was laid out, and or if they understood it, but just couldn't demonstrate understanding the proper formula, how to plug things into the equation that they were trying to solve. It's very interesting, and we have to be intentional about assessment. And I want to be clear that I don't advocate for throwing out assessments. A lot of people get that idea that we don't want to assess. We do want to assess. We just want assessments to be targeted, to be clear, and we don't want to over assess. We want to allow a lot of practice in between those assessments so that we can measure growth.
So, what advice would you give to schools or districts that are considering shifting towards mastery based learning? And what are the most important first steps?
I think the most important first steps would be to, it can't be top down driven. It really needs to be a boots on the ground approach, and it needs to be led by the educators. And educators need to be empowered as the professionals that they are. They know their content, they know their standards very well, and we need to trust them to put together and give them the time to put together the materials that they need in order to start making this shift. Chances are, if you have a conversation with the educators and say, what changes do we need to make sure that we are accurately assessing our students, not over assessing our students, and we can have a grade book that demonstrates what they do and do not know? Chances are they will have some boots on the ground feedback for curriculum adoptions. What's going on in the curriculum adoptions that needs to be tweaked or just obviously maybe thrown out altogether? And what needs to happen is allow the educators to start putting together some of those assessments. I have to say that I am so grateful that I work with an administrative team that does not micromanage my English department. They have empowered us to the fullest. And we put together our own rubrics. We put together our own assessments, and we'll take it to the table and we'll share it across various departments because in the state of California, our ninth and 10th grade standards are the same. 11th and 12th grade standards are the same. And we can collaborate together and say, I'm working on this, and does this accurately measure what it is we're teaching them and what we're assessing? And we utilize our expertise in the room, and we've come up with some fantastic rubrics. And they're the rubrics that are in my book for credit recovery through demonstration of mastery. And those were educator created.
I highly recommend that you look into David Woodward with, I want to say it's Forefront Education. I'll have to put that in the show notes. But what's really interesting about him and then what you're talking about, so you have your state curriculum standards that you're trying to meet, and it looks at, instead of grading points based, you go specifically into that standard. Can the student understand where to put comma? It would be proficient at grade level, below grade level. And
Yes.
for each standard, you're able to say, okay, this is what the student can do. They have mastered this skill. We need to work on this skill. And those are two things that could really be tied together very well with
Yes.
what you're.
Thank you so much. I wrote his name down. Let me add that. Thank you.
And that actually brings us to my next question. Looking ahead, our education system is evolving rapidly and mastery based models are gaining a lot of traction. If you were to look 5 or 10 years into the future, how do you envision mastery based learning evolving, and what potential do you see it in reshaping our credit recovery programs?
That's a very difficult question because a part of it is you do have educators who are innovative. They are looking to constantly improve. And unfortunately, there are a few, in my experiences, I can't speak for everyone, there are a few who are not as willing to evolve and change. So there's a balance right there. For those who, which in my opinion is the majority, who are continually revisiting their practices and looking to evolve them, I believe that they will be the leaders because as they grow and learn more about how to accurately assess and shift away from any practices that were just a part of our public school experience, and we start to expose ourselves to more research that is out there, they'll be leading the forefront.
My daughter, I don't know if I actually mentioned this to you. She goes to a mastery based program, and it's really interesting. I like it because, at least with her program, she gets the foundation before she moves forward. And that's kind of what I think is important. If you don't have that core foundation, everything else is just going to have holes in it. And that's whenever we really start to see those deep gaps in knowledge.
Yes, and before I really understood how to read data, it was frustrating for me. Why are you putting all these numbers in front of me? What does this even mean? Help me decipher. And our district started utilizing Solution Tree. And so we work in our PLCs, and our district has been intentional about allowing us at least 3 weeks out of every month where we get an hour solid to work in our PLCs. So we're collaborating, we're looking at data. Our district also has 3 days a year where we are off site. They get us a sub, and we're collaborating not just with, I'll take 11th grade for instance, not just with our 11th grade team on our school site, but we're at the district office and we're meeting with the 11th grade teams from the other comprehensive high schools in our district. And we're looking at the most recent data that came out. And so we look at the data, they're good here, they're not good there. What do we need to do? And so we are given time to put together some materials, resources right then and there and say, okay, we see our students are not very good at understanding and pulling out the central idea. We see that they're not good at two-part questions. What is the central idea and what part of the text supports that being the central idea? All right, now we know that we need to incorporate that. The most recent meeting that we had, that was what we had learned. And so we pulled together, as we call it, our CAS boot camp slides, where we took a bigger text, we chunked it up, and we came up with two-part questions. And we do that as our warm-ups now. So we put it up there, we read it together, we answer the parts, we cold call. What's your answer for part A, part B? Okay, let's look at what the answer actually is. Why is that the answer? How were these two things misleading? So if we know how to look back at data, how to then build resources for targeted instruction, and then incorporate it as practice, not another assessment right away, but as practice in a informal way that relieves some of that stress and anxiety from our students, then next time we assess you, I would expect that the data would improve. So I believe that educators, for the most part, want to improve practices. And when we come in context with ways to improve our practices and we are given the time to put together those resources, it'll be a beautiful world.
It is a beautiful world. I actually want to transition a little bit to your research now.
Okay.
So, everyone on here knows reading is just a fundamental part of success in school and in life. Your research focuses on the relationship between reading and mindset. So, what are some of the most surprising or insightful findings that you've come across?
Let me explain the tool that I used first, and then I can explain the data. So I utilize the SARA, which stands for the Survey of Adolescent Reading Attitude. And I took a look at sophomore students' attitude towards reading when exposed to mirror books. So we use the SARA as a pre-treatment assessment to understand where their attitudes were. And that SARA measures reading attitude in four subcomponents: academic, print, academic digital, recreational print, recreational digital. So after getting that baseline score, the treatment group was exposed to mirror books, and the non treatment book was exposed to some high interest texts but not considered mirror books. And then both groups were given the survey again. What we found is that attitude towards academic print improved, and attitude towards recreational digital, which was social media, dropped a little bit. Those shifts were not measured as statistically significant, but there was a shift. So it was interesting to see, okay, this was a 6-week study. What might it be? Would the shift be considered, or would it measure statistically significant if the study was longer? Or if another change I considered is I pre-chose books that I would consider as mirror books for students. There's a possibility that the students may not have seen them as mirror books themselves. So if I could find out from students, what books would you be interested in reading? Collect those books or have them take the survey, let them read the books they chose, and then redo the survey. Might those numbers be different? So I came away with a sliver of an answer, but a lot more questions than answers. So it inspires me to go back to the table and do some additional research.
I feel your pain. I think all of the researchers on here feel your pain. So much more that we can learn, but you
Yeah.
definitely are making great strides. So, when students have negative associations with reading, maybe early struggles, past experiences, how can we help shift those attitudes?
I think it would depend on what is the motivation or the lack of motivation for the students' poor associations with reading. Was it a lack of access, or was the books they were given boring? What started me on this journey was I had some 10th graders about 6 or 7 years ago, and they flat out said, reading is boring. I was taken aback. I was like, what? What do you mean it's boring? What? Why? It was like, it's just boring. And I asked him, I said, have you always considered reading boring? And they thought about it and they said, no. I said, okay, when did you find it interesting? And now it's a whole class discussion. It went from me and one student to now we're all talking about it. And the consensus of that group was that they liked reading in elementary. They recalled their whole class going down to the school library, choosing their book. You come back to class, and periodically throughout the week, your teacher would say, okay, take out your library book. We're going to read, set the timer, and everybody read their book. And that reminds me of the research that I read about the importance of choice. And so, having a conversation with these students, I said, when did you stop having choice? When did that change for you? And the consensus was middle school. That was when they stopped having autonomy, stopped having choice over what to read. It was just, we're reading this text and here we go. And that was what prompted me to do this research. And that was what taught me choice matters, mirror books matter. There's a lot of things that matter. Sometimes it is not ability. Sometimes it's what they're given to read. And that even prompted me to do possibly a case study. It might be interesting to get some actual data that's not statistical, but more open ended questions where I can talk to some high schoolers and get the recording of this conversation into some research. Let them tell us why they don't like it. Is it boring? Are you struggling? Can we get you some help? But I think we really have to figure out the nuances of why the attitudes are poor towards reading. More questions.
I would be curious to know if reading attitude and reading mindset correlates with academic performance, not just with our English language, but math, science, history.
That's very interesting. You said that. One of my colleagues, Dr. Moore, we're going to do that study. That's next on our docket. We want to find out if there is a correlation between Lexile level and attitude towards reading. We would naturally assume that maybe a student might have a poor disposition towards reading because their Lexile is low. But until we measure it and have some data that says, hey, this is what the data shows, we don't know. So that's what we're going to be working on next, very soon, actually.
Send it to me and I will do a research
Absolutely.
review on it. I'm starting a new segment.
Absolutely. Really?
I
That's so
am.
interesting. I just started a podcast 2 weeks ago.
No, tell us about it.
It is called Drive Through Lit Review, which you just said you're doing a lit review podcast. We can be on each other's podcast. Most of the teachers that I've had conversations with, they're fascinated to find out what is going on in the research towards education. We're pressed for time. We don't have the time to go look for the research and then read it and then learn to practice and do those things. So I thought about all the plethora of material that I read for my dissertation. And I said, people need to know about these articles because every time I would mention mirror books, people would go, what's that? And so in my podcast, I'm pulling one of the pieces of literature that I read for my dissertation. I'm telling you the title. I'm telling you it's basically a lit review, the abstract, the key details from it, and telling you where I found it. And it's meant to be short, 5 to 10 minutes. Just listen to it in the car on the way, and here's some stuff for you. And I'm predominantly aiming it towards ELA teachers. because I feel like I better understand that particular demographic of educators. So that's my focus.
All right, say it again and say where it's at.
Okay. It's called Drive Through Lit Review, and it's streaming wherever you can find your podcast. Apple, Spotify. I only have 2 episodes out right now.
I will link it for everyone in the credits
Thank
for
you so
sure.
much. And I just want to put out the intro and outro music. My son created that. So for all the listeners out there, when you listen to it, I have my son to thank for that beautiful background music.
I love it.
Thank you.
All right, back to research and reading.
Yes.
What strategies have you found most effective in helping students move from I hate reading to I want to read more?
I would say choice. I actually take my students to the library every couple of weeks. And actually, a student just reminded me that we hadn't gone to the library in a while since last semester. So I got to get myself back in gear. And I let them choose a book, and we do sustained silent reading in our classroom Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. We have a little shift in our schedule in that our Wednesdays are shortened class period because that's where we get our educator time for collaboration with our departments as well as within our PLCs. And so the students have a shortened day because we start at regular time, but they come 2 hours later. And they have really, they don't hate it as much as the size that I would get at the beginning of the year. Come on, guys, you would think I just asked you to do the most horrible chore on the planet. And now they don't hate it. And as I mentioned, one of my students said, we haven't read lately. We haven't been to the library. Why we haven't done that? I said, thank you for reminding me. I'm going to get back on that. And sometimes that's the challenge. We only get our students in our class for a 55-minute period. It's like, how do we make the most of that 55-minute period? And with the last data that I mentioned we had done, and that our students struggle with those two-part questions, looking at the central idea and finding the text to support it, we had made up those warm-ups. And so that's taking 10 minutes. If I can't do that for 10 minutes and read for 15 minutes, then where's the actual content? But now I have to ask myself, if they're asking for it, I need to deliver. So I have to figure out how I'm going to shift my classroom in order to accommodate both.
So, have to go back just a little bit. So, our digital tools and our media, these have transformed how young people engage with text. How do you leverage technology to support reading growth without losing the magic of storytelling?
I think for me, understanding how I need to be intentional about integrating targeted reading strategies, because I know that I have a lot of my students who are struggling, and it's not fair for me to assess them on reading if I'm not helping you grow your reading. And I utilize technology through slideshow. Google Slides is like my best friend to be able to chunk up a text and have the text only take up 3/4 of the screen, and the other 1/4, we're talking about the nuances of the text. And I'm giving you a place to make notes as we're having those conversations. One of the biggest tools in my arsenal for targeted intervention is summary, providing context for them, and making sure that I'm giving them the opportunity to record their thoughts and their ideas, have conversations with their peers to learn from their peers just as well as me. So digital in that regard has really opened the way that I'm doing things. I'm not rushing to the copier, printing things off, and did you lose it? Oh, now you got to start all over. Everything's right there in Google Classroom. It's there for you digitally. So that's been a great tool for me as well as the students, because it allows them also to be able, I'm at my district went 1-to-1 with technology. So we've given all of our students Chromebooks. And for students who may not have internet access at home, we even give them hotspots. So I know that I can extend the learning outside of the classroom for students who need those additional supports. I have a lot of English language learners in our district, and being able to make an additional resource of maybe scaffold sentence frames or templates to give access to those students who feel that they need it has been a great digital source for me able to give them. Now, the magic of the storytelling, I think, stays present through our conversation and our dialogue. I love having discussion questions for the text that we're doing beyond just the analysis. What is it that we're liking about this character, right? How do we like the setting? How does the setting impact how we're seeing it? I like to relate it to scary movies. I said, we've all been in that scary movie, right? And we know something's about to happen the minute we hear the music. I said, the same is true in stories. There's something that happens that goes, uh-oh, something's about to happen. And we can pinpoint that. What's that called? Foreshadowing. We get foreshadowing in the movies with the music, and it's on the paper. We just have to pay attention to it. So I try to bridge the real world with what's happening in the stories that we're reading. Or even if we're reading informational text, talking about tone, I tell them, I said, maybe your mom might have said it to you differently, but this is what my mom said to me. It's not what you say, but how you say it. When my mother said that to me, she was talking about tone. How many of you have had your mom say something similar to you? Hands go up. How did your mom say it? Oh, okay. So now we've connected and we've talked about tone. Okay, this text has tone too. What tone are we talking about? Are they saying it in a tone that makes it easy for me to hear? Or are they saying it in a tone where they know that I may not want to hear it, but they have to say it anyway? And we talked about that in 11th grade. Right now, we're in our rhetorical unit. And so we're looking at some U.S. seminal documents. We looked at Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. We looked at the preamble to the Constitution. And we looked at Frederick Douglass' speech, What to the Slave is Fourth of July. And to be able to look at the tone at that, as at the beginning, he says, I have to tell you this, you're not going to like it, but I need to say it anyway. I said, what do we call that tone? And giving them a list of tone words with the definitions and giving them the power to find it. Oh, that's the right fit. Yeah, we can keep the magic alive through the discussion and still engage with technology.
That's what I love about classic literature. Got finished with Oliver Twist, and I'm like, this is as relevant today as it was when it was written.
It is very interesting when we can look at an older text and say, in what ways is this still relevant today? And have their eyes open. Wow, that is still important today.
Are there particular age groups or student populations where mindset interventions have the greatest impact?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm an expert enough to answer that question because my experience is limited. Most of my research has focused on minority populations, and being the fact that I'm teaching in a minority school, I can see it's prevalent here, but I don't necessarily want to assume that it's not as important for teachers who are teaching in areas that are not predominantly minority based. So I can say that it's definitely important here in terms of teaching a minority demographics for various reasons. I see students that don't see themselves as educationally successful. I'll have students, one of the things I do in the very beginning of our school year is I create cold calling cards. And I ask digital, I put it up on a slideshow. I say, here's your index card. We're going to answer these questions. One of the questions I ask them is, what is your favorite subject and why? What is your worst subject and why? And so when I'm reading through those, a lot of students will say, math is my worst subject because I'm just not good at it. Now that tells me that you don't see yourself. Your mindset is, I can't do that. I've even had students say, I just can't do it. My mom said she wasn't good at it either. So now we have a generational mindset. So that's what I've experienced. And it's important to give students who have a mindset where they don't see themselves, that's not for them. They don't see themselves successful at that. Give them those small successes. I believe in you. I think we can do it. I'll cold call on a student. They'll go, I don't know. That's the one answer you're never allowed to give in my class. I said, I don't know says I'm not willing to work or try. I said, you're welcome to be wrong. You can give me a wrong answer and we'll work it out together. You can ask me a clarifying question about something you didn't understand, and I will answer that for you. But we can't say I don't know. And they'll sit there And my student, I don't want to say it. I said, would you like to collaborate with your group? Maybe somebody in your group. I said, and you're welcome to share an answer you heard from someone else. It's not cheating if you've been given permission to collaborate. And it's important for them to have a little bit of struggle and get success. One of the educators that I have tremendous respect for, Dr. Muhammad, he came to our school site and he was talking about restorative practices. And one of the quadrants, he gave us this, in, if I can describe it for you, it's a big box. And that box is broken down into 4 quadrants, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. And the bottom is support. Going far right, you're giving maximum support. The scale on the left that points up is expectation. High up, you have high expectations. And so I told the idea is that we should be in that top right quadrant. High support, high expectation. And so I tell my student, that's my job. I'm not going to lower my expectation for you, but I am going to be the support system to help you get there. And those supports don't have to come just from me. It can come in collaborative discussions in the classroom. It can come from working with peers. And those are important for minority learners. I have English language learners. And small successes and helping them to experience them through multiple means is very important.
What advice would you give to teachers who feel like they're constantly fighting an uphill battle when it comes to getting students to read?
Have a conversation with them. Ask them why they don't want to read and see if their why they don't like it is within your power to fix. If students say that they don't like the text that you're reading, do you have the power to choose something else? I've actually done what I call literary circles in my classroom where everybody didn't want to read the same book. And I did that most recently with my AP Lit students. One of them wanted to read Josefina Lopez, Real Women Have Curves. The other one wanted to read Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. I said, okay. And so I said, here, we're going to go to the library. You're going to get your book. You got it. All right. Now it's your job. We need to have this read in 3 weeks. Now you with your team work out your reading schedule. How many pages do you need to read a day in order to accomplish what I'm asking you to do? Okay, great. And so I created then a slideshow. I love digital, where I was giving mini lessons on a aspect of the book we needed to look at. Setting. What is setting in terms of time and place and nuances? So I could then give my lesson on setting and then ask them an open-ended question that they could collaborate in their group. What do you know about the setting of your book based upon what we just discussed? Now they're collaborating together. They had choice. Our setting of the book is here, this, that, and the other. Okay, who is your main character? What do we know about our main character? Then we have a lesson on direct versus indirect characterization. So if you can be flexible, and if you can't be flexible, have a conversation with your admin. My students just told me they don't like to read because the books we have are boring. I asked them what books they would like to read, but these aren't on the approved list. How can you work with me to get the books they said that they want to read on the approved list? So let's ask them and see what changes we can make.
If you had the opportunity to redesign the way we teach reading in schools, what changes would you prioritize to better engage students and build lifelong readers?
I would always keep choice at the forefront of everything that I did. That conversation that I had with those sophomore students many years ago was very impactful to me. It communicated to me the importance of giving my students choice. And I've carried that with me ever since I learned that lesson. And I'm thankful to that student for being bold enough to say that. And I'm thankful to myself for being humble enough to receive it, that they said reading was boring. And instead of me getting mad, you're going to read this anyway. I said, okay, why? And that sparked me on this journey. The things that my students have taught me is how much they will dig in when they like the text. They've taught me that their choice matters. And I've even had to read a book I didn't want to read because they wanted to read it. Yeah, I was like, this book is sad. Did you read the synopsis? I don't want to read this book. But I said, okay, I'm going to read it because you want to read it. And we had some great conversations. And when they got behind on the reading, I was able to say, hey, you picked it. And so I've been flexible with my students, and that's made a huge difference. Now, if a student picks it and they still find themselves boring, that makes me mad.
I've done that though. I've picked a book and I'm like, this is not for me. I'm going to get a different one.
And I do that with my students in terms of the sustained silent reading time. If they chose a book and they didn't like it, I write them a pass. So you can go back to the library and you can switch it for something else. But if we selectively do it as a whole group, you stuck with it because there's 10 other people that are counting on you. Yes. And I've started books that I've made myself finish. I've done that. But then I also have books that I've set aside and said, what did we talk about? In my book group, we talked about not calling it the did not finish. We calling it the not right now. Sometimes the mind space where you're in or whatever's going on in the world makes that read a tough read at that time. And you may need to that's my not right now book.
Oh my goodness. This has been just a delightful conversation, Dr. Brown. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. I have enjoyed sharing this time with you.
Can you tell us one more time your new podcast? And then if listeners want to connect with you, get your book, where can they find you?
My podcast is Drive Through Lit Review, and I spell it THRU. And they can find it wherever podcasts are streamed, Spotify, Apple, I think even on Google. And to connect with me, my website is Dr. Valcine Brown. You spell it VALCINE, Brown, just like the color, no E at the end.com. And you can purchase the book either through my website or you can go to Amazon.
To our listeners, for those of you who want to dive deeper into Dr. Brown's work, be sure to check out her book, Credit Recovery Through Demonstration of Mastery. It's a practical guide for educators seeking new strategies to help students succeed through mastery-based learning. You can find it on Amazon and all the other major book retailers. Thank you again for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with fellow educators and changemakers. Let's continue to rethink, reimagine, and reinvent education together. Until next time, I'm Dr. Riley Williams. Stay curious and keep innovating.